Venezuela is condemning what it calls a military provocation by U.S. forces in the Caribbean after the Pentagon sent a U.S. carrier strike group to the region as part of a military exercise. It all follows the deadly strikes on at least 10 alleged drug boats since September, killing more than 40 people. Lawmakers from both parties are now asking a whole lot of questions.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. The Trump regime is gearing up for war without any consultations with Congress and without providing a clear rationale to the American people. This is serious. I'm going to keep the intro short today because I want to get right into what Congressman Jason Crow has to say. He's a former Army Ranger who now sits on the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and on the House Armed Services Committee, where he is the ranking member on the Subcommittee for Intelligence and Special Operations. If anyone can help us understand what's happening and how we got here, it's Jason Crow. Here's our conversation. Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. I've got Congressman Jason Crow with me. He's a former Army Ranger now representing Colorado's 6th Congressional District, and he just delivered a landmark address to the Center for American Progress in which he talked about America's place in the world, American citizens' place in America, and critically, how we rebuild trust. Jason, welcome to the show.
Ken, it's always wonderful to be with you. Thanks for having me back.
I love the speech. I want to get to parts of it, but I'm wondering what prompted you to put this out there now, and if you started it before the Trump regime began blowing boats out of the water without any justification, at least to Congress, not just in the Caribbean now, but as I understand it, they have moved to the East Pacific as well. Surely that is raising alarm bells on the Armed Services Committee and elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, Ken, as you mentioned, the thrust of the speech was about trust because, all the think tanks and the talking heads and, all the people holding policy salons in this town, which they love to do, still don't seem to get it. They think that we're having a policy discussion, that we just need to come up with more white papers, more essays and magazines and to crack the code. Problem is America just doesn't trust the institution. And that's, in large part what delivered us Donald Trump, right? They look at the foreign policy, national security institution, and they're like, wow, this has failed us for most of our life. Failed wars in the Middle East, failed trade deals that have gutted industrial working class America, failed response to the pandemic. Just these series of incompetent or poorly executed things that have had tremendous impact on people's lives. So this is all about trust, and to re-earn people's trust, you have to show that you're serious about doing things differently. So this was not a comprehensive thesis on every single foreign policy challenge facing our country. What I tried to do yesterday is talk about what are the biggest things we can do to show people that we get it.
There's some good policy stuff in there, some good historical stuff in there, but it feels like the moral center of the speech is captured in this one paragraph. You wrote that what I learned as a young man, and this is after joining the Army as a private. You're a congressman who started as a private. That's incredibly rare. I want people to understand that. Most go through the academy or become officers and then go to Harvard Business School or whatever. You raised your right hand. You enlisted as a private in the U.S. Army, the lowest rank possible. And you wrote that what you learned as a young man is that when people pound their chest and bang the war drums in Washington and they talk about going to do tough things, they're not talking about themselves. I'm picturing Pete Hegseth right now. They're talking about young kids from towns many of us haven't heard of that have to pick up rifles, jump into helicopters, get inside tanks, and do the tough stuff. When you talk about the breakdown in trust, that is the most sacred trust that we have lost, the trust with the rifleman, with the private, who we are asking to risk his or her life based on decisions made by the chest thumpers in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you hear this all the time coming out of Trump and other people. And by the way, this is just not about Trumpism. We do ourselves a great disservice if we put all of this on Donald Trump, who is terrible in my view. Right? I think he's the most corrupt president in the history of this country. He's a threat to our democracy. But we are not going to fix this, and we are not going to start winning elections again until we actually address the core of the issue, and that is vast swaths of this country look at the political institution and they say, wow, a lot of people like to talk tough or do tough things or talk about sacrifice, and they sure as shit are not talking about themselves. They're talking about me. I'm the one that gets the short straw. And that's really what this is about. So we can't talk our way through that. There has to be really meaningful action. That was the other thrust of this speech, which is why I started it out by talking about war powers, which might seem wonky, but what it actually just means is Congress needs to be accountable and take regular votes and be responsible for funding military interventions. No more blank checks. No more passing the buck and lack of accountability. Right? You want to bomb Iran. You want to bomb the Houthis. You want to bomb wooden rafts without board motors in the Caribbean. Well, you got to debate it and you got to vote on it, and we can't use debt spending to finance it. Right? And if we do that, we would have radically different outcomes. I guarantee it.
Can you explain to the non-wonks what you mean by requiring that kind of authorization? Because there have been authorizations. Congress has weighed in, but it's weighed in to abdicate responsibility. When it passes something like an AUMF, it does it to abdicate responsibility and surrender control to the executive. Yeah. So the laws are being passed, but they are laws that gut the traditional Article I powers that the framers intended Congress to maintain.
Yeah, the framers actually put a lot of foreign policy and national security responsibility on Congress, right? Trade deals, treaties and alliances, immigration, appropriations, war powers. They envisioned a substantial foreign policy role for the United States Congress from day one. And they did because they looked at the crown, they looked at the empire that they rebelled against, and they said, wow, that they had become so completely disconnected from the people with empire building and military misadventures that it ended up collapsing under its own weight. So how do we prevent that from happening, right? So they put it in the place that is most accountable and closest to the people, and that is the Congress. And what I mean by that is this Congress that's going to their districts, living in their districts, standing in front of constituents, standing for re-election regularly. The accountability and the closeness to the people is, frankly, in the House of Representatives, where every weekend we are back holding town halls, or at least they should be, right? Representatives are ducking that now, but holding town halls and standing in front of people. And what needs to happen is every year, if we have a military operation from somewhere, a member of Congress needs to be standing in front of their constituents physically and saying, I'm asking for your money. I'm asking for your sons and daughters, your brothers and sisters to stand up and fight for this, that we're going to send our kids and our money. And here's why it's important. Here's why we absolutely need to do this and why it's relevant to your life. And if you can't do that, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Hey everyone, it's Ken. Quick break here to say thanks for watching and a huge shout out to everyone who supported my most recent reporting trip to Ukraine. I hope you followed the updates on Substack. I reported from Chernobyl, from Kyiv and Odessa, and from frontline positions alongside some of the bravest people I have ever met. If you haven't yet signed up for my Substack, please check it out. It's free to join. The link's below. Thanks. I appreciate your effort, your attempt to spread the blame, because this is a bipartisan failing. But surely we have to acknowledge that we have reached new milestones in the Trump regime in breaking trust, not just with the American people, but with the American soldier and sailor and airman in particular. I'm thinking about Hegseth's cringy speech. There aren't even words to describe it, to the assembled generals, which I just learned is now required viewing for every member of the DoD, including those overseas. And when you have a leadership like that is so much more invested in their own personal image than they are the welfare of the troops, I mean, that is not a bipartisan problem. That is an almost defining feature of the Trump regime, the cult of personality from the top down. Can we at least acknowledge that things have gotten immeasurably worse?
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, there's no false equivalency. When I talk about the history of the, of our largely failed war on terror, $3 trillion, 3 million combat deployments, 7,000 Americans dead, tens of thousands of others, with pretty poor results, by almost every measure. And it was 10 Congresses, Republican and Democrat, that did that. Multiple presidents, both Republican and Democrat, that did that. That is the history, and I'm just honest about that history. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not even close. The things that this administration is doing, from politicizing our military to sending National Guard from red states into blue states, to quote unquote going to war with American cities, as this rhetoric, to just completely unchecked military interventions, to talking about regime change in Venezuela because we're so damn good at regime change, right? I mean, for God's sakes, what in our history would lead anyone to believe that regime change and nation building is a core competency of ours? Yeah. Right? Like, this is nuts.
Especially in that part of the world.
Yeah.
In Latin and South America.
I mean, it's just the height of insanity. So this has got to change. And, I think my bottom line message is somebody can change that. And that somebody is the United States Congress. Like, we actually do have the power, right? We do. We just have to use it. Of course, House Republicans have cowed and prostrated themselves to the altar of Donald Trump, which is the biggest problem, which is why we simply just need to push back and beat them at the ballot box.
Last question, somewhat of a non sequitur, but I ask every elected and every candidate for Congress about what they will do if and when the House flips and sanity returns to hold ICE accountable and DHS accountable for what they are doing right now on America's streets. And you see it in Colorado as well. Blatant, intentional, wanton violations of civil rights and the Constitution. When are we going to send the message that accountability is coming? If not to restore the rule of law, then at least to be the kind of deterrent that might make that ICE agent think twice.
Yeah, well, we need to be sending that message right now. And I'm glad you asked the question. Right? The message loud and clear should be, you might think that you can act with impunity and do whatever you want, but eventually there will be accountability, right? Which is also why what I call citizen oversight, which is so critical right now, people filming these interactions, taking pictures. I mean, we see that is actually really important work because they are documenting and making a record of these things for future accountability. If someone is violating the law, if they are abusing people, if they're violent, if they are abusing their authority, and we're seeing lots of instances of that there must be accountability, and the message very clearly should be, you will not be able to hide from that accountability, even if you're wearing a mask. Which also is very telling as well. I bristle at this notion. You and I wore the uniform, deployed and overseas, and with pride. There's just the notion that people, federal law enforcement, who are supposed to be servants of the people and working for us, have to hide their faces and not wear identification and markings for what agency they belong to. I mean, that is antithetical to everything that I know and knew when I was wearing the uniform in service to this nation.
100%. Jason, great having you. Let's check in more often. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.